Hello my small fat adapted family, and welcome to the final of the Great Keto Bake Off 2021. This year saw us make failed Swiss rolls, because I didn't know you had to roll them warm, a biscuit aeroplane, a little bit of artsy focaccia bread, sticky toffee pudding, apple biscuits, failed choux pastry donuts, but they were accompanied by a beautiful pistachio cream, a chocolate and ginger tart that was quite pleasant but a little bit strange, ice cream sandwiches, and last week, of course, a raspberry sablé breton tart. Can you believe it's been 10 weeks already? As always, I'm so appreciative of the love and support that you guys give this series, but now it's time to talk about episode 10, the final of the Great British Bake Off 2021. So the signature was decorated and flavoured carrot cakes, the technical was Belgian buns, and the showstopper was a Mad Hatter's Tea Party display with 4 different bakes, both savoury and sweet. The carrot cake sounded really good until we actually got to the flavours, as they were pretty high carb flavours that were going to be really difficult to make a perfect replacement with low carb ingredients. And then the showstopper this week was, I only do 1 recipe a week, and that would have been 4 different recipes and a lot of time. So that just leaves us, of course, with the technical. So for the final of the Great British Bake Off, I will be keto-fying Belgian buns. My version of these will be a fathead based bun that is filled with cranberries instead of sultanas or raisins, and has a lemon curd inside. It will then be rolled and cooked like cinnamon rolls. But with that said, let's get cooking. So in terms of ingredients, you will need for the fathead 300 grams of mozzarella that is shredded, 56 grams of soft cheese. That's kind of your choice what cheese you want to use. Cream cheese, mascarpone, ricotta. I'm actually using sour cream today to use up some that we had left over from a recipe a few days ago. 2 eggs, 125 grams of almond flour, 1 tablespoon of coconut flour, 2 teaspoons of baking powder, and 1/3 cup of sweetener, preferably a powdered sweetener. I'm using powdered erythritol. Then for the lemon curd, you will need 3 tablespoons of lemon juice, a tablespoon of lemon zest. I'm using dried zest, 1/4 cup of sweetener, 25 grams of butter, 1 large egg, and 1 large egg yolk. Then the other ingredients that you will need are about 30 grams of cranberries that have been chopped up, 10 cranberries that are whole, 4 tablespoons of powdered sweetener, and a splash of cream or water. So the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to actually start with our lemon curd, because it takes a little bit of time to cook, and we also want to leave it to chill before we put it on our fathead dough. So you want to get a small saucepan and put it over a very low heat. This saucepan has a little bit of water in it, and I'm just going to bring that up to a very, very gentle simmer. Now you're going to want a bowl that will fit on your saucepan but will not touch the water, and in that bowl you're going to want to put your butter, your lemon juice, your lemon zest, and your sweetener. This is going to go over the top of the pan with water in it when it's very gently simmering, and we're going to leave that until the butter has melted. Whilst the butter is melting with the lemon ingredients, we're just going to prep the eggs really quickly. So you want to add a whole egg to a bowl, and then add the egg yolk, and then just beat the eggs together. So now our butter has completely melted and we've mixed the ingredients in. We're going to add our egg mixture, and we're going to mix that in really well. So now we're going to leave our lemon curd to cook for about 8 to 10 minutes, stirring occasionally until it's nice and thick. The eggs have cooked in evenly, and when we put a spoon into the mixture sits on the back of the spoon. It sticks to the back of the spoon. That's when we'll know that it's ready. Okay, so the lemon curd is now ready. It's nice and thick. It coats the back of my fork, and it's nice and creamy as well. What we're going to do is we're going to take it off of the pan of water, and we're just going to set it aside to cool down until we need to use it. In the meantime, we're actually going to start on our fathead dough. Now I know everything about this might seem completely wrong to you, using mozzarella to make a sweet food. You can't taste the cheese in a fathead recipe unless you're making it overly cheesy. The only worry I actually have is that Belgian buns are pillowy because they're yeast risen. So there's not going to be that pillowiness in this recipe, and I worry that it might be a little bit dry, so I'm really hoping that the lemon curd helps just bring in a little bit of moisture to it where it might potentially be a little bit too dry. But the problem is I could counter the dryness by adding more sort of soft cheese, but then you run the risk of it being doughy. Anyway, to make the fathead dough, we're going to take our dry ingredients and mix them together. So that is our almond flour, our large amount of baking powder, our coconut flour, and our sweetener. And that all just gets mixed together. Then once that's mixed, that just gets set aside for a second. Then you want to take your mozzarella cheese and you want to add your soft cheese to it. Give it a real quick mix. You don't have to be thorough with it. It's just to combine it just ever so slightly. Then you want to pop it in your microwave for 1 minute increments until it is like a cheese fondue. Of course, make sure the bowl that you're putting the mozzarella in is microwave safe. So after you've gotten it out of the microwave, you just want to give it a real quick stir before you pop it in the microwave again. So after 2 minutes, my mozzarella is nice and fondue-y and elasticy and easy to work with. That was 2 minutes in an 1000-watt microwave. Now we're going to add the eggs. This is the most difficult part of making any fathead dough. I actually have a recipe on how to make, in my opinion, the best fathead pizza you will have in your life, and it doesn't use eggs at all. And part of the reason I wanted to get rid of using eggs in fathead dough is because it is an absolute nightmare to mix eggs with mozzarella. So once you've added your eggs, you just want to slowly start trying to sort of fold the mozzarella into them and mix them as best you can. It is very unlikely you'll be able to fully mix them in this step, but that's okay, because when we add the dry ingredients, it will help mix them. Just try and get them as well mixed as you can. Now at this point, I would suggest, you can of course you carry on using your spoon, but I would suggest you take off any jewellery, and you need this mixture to really incorporate those eggs into the mozzarella. You just want to make sure you keep combining until there's no longer mozzarella streaks, and of course the egg has completely combined. The other thing that you need to do around about now that I completely forgot again is put your oven on. You want to put your oven on about 200 Celsius or 400 Fahrenheit. That's one good thing about not working with yeast and gluten, is there's no over mixing worries here. Okay, so once you are happy that your dough is well mixed, it will be quite sticky. So I've got myself a massive piece of parchment paper, and I'm going to use a little tiny bit of extra virgin olive oil and just rub that into the parchment paper. So now I've greased that base, I'm going to take my dough and pop it there. So I actually want this on one side of this. That's okay because it's oily enough. And I'm going to add just a dribble more oil on the top. Then that will go over the top like that. And we will roll this into a large, quite thin rectangle. Now, because I want this really thin, which it is pretty thin, but the edges aren't thin enough and it's coming out of the actual paper, I'm going to actually oil my surface a little bit and do it here. Oh, it feels so wrong, so wrong. Just pouring oil on the side. Oh, that's going to be a nightmare to get off. Tell you what, the oil's working because it's not sticking together. Feels like I'm making focaccia. It's just so I can get these edges that were coming out of the parchment paper to be thin enough. Now, what I think is actually the best thing to do is to put it back on the parchment paper to roll it. So we now have a large dough. Our lemon curd has cooled down enough for us to put it on this dough. However, I had a little taste of it earlier, and of course I forgot, using dry zest, you tend to need to use less, so it's very lemony, very bitter, without having the sweetness to it that I'd like. So what the first thing I'm going to do is sprinkle some sweetener on our dough base before I then... Actually, no, I'll put that on first, then I'll sprinkle some sweetener on it. So with a knife, I'm adding my curd. Now, there's no need to sort of leave any space at the edges or anything for this one. I'm going to use the whole lot of curd, even though I probably don't need to. I've probably got about a tablespoon's worth left because I've counted it all into the macros. So we're having the whole lot. The other reason I'm adding quite a liberal sprinkling of sweetener on the top of this is because if this is bitter, we're about to use cranberries and they are sour, and all this is going to taste like is a sour, bitter mess. Okay, so now we're going to take our cranberries and we're just going to sprinkle them across the whole piece, kind of trying to get them as even as possible across. So the next step is, of course, rolling this. So I'll just turn it on its side on this lovely oily top. Just cut it at about halfway. You don't want to be moved up. Let me move you up. Right, now I'm going to cut this sheet in half. You want it to be not really, really tight, but obviously enough to create a nice, hopefully, swirling effect. And this is so easy to roll. This is the easiest thing I think I've ever rolled in my life, because the fathead is nice and oiled and it's just so flexible, so pliable. Should we get maybe 5 out of that? Let's just cut them and see sort of how we like the sizing. I like about that size, I think, is a nice size. It's about that size, I think. Oh, look at me using the other one to measure this one and actually doing it evenly. So that gives me 5 rolls like that. It's so nice to have something that's so easy to roll. Look at that. So these will be baked for about 10 minutes and then they will be turned in the oven and baked for another sort of 10 to 15 minutes in hopes to just sort of evenly brown them across the board. Of course, I will let you know exactly how long they took. So in the end, our Belgian buns took 10 minutes, turn them, another 10 minutes. Then, because I had them on 2 different racks, I swapped them around because the top rack was getting quite brown. I swapped them around, cooked them for another 5, so a total of 25 minutes, took them out, gave them just a couple of minutes, and they were still really, really soft. So I lifted them onto the wire rack and left them to cool down until they were cold enough to put icing on the top. They're still ever so slightly warm, but it's sort of more towards room temperature, really. So I think it'll be okay to put icing on them. So what we're going to do is we're going to just pop them aside for a second and we're going to make our icing glaze. This is really simple. You take your powdered sweetener and you add a literal splash of cream. You know the saying, you can add but you can't take away. So you just want to add the tiniest little amount and mix it. And of course you can use water to do this instead. I just prefer the taste of it when it's with cream. So we're just going to add another little splash and I'm just going to keep building up until I have a nice stiff icing that is still a little bit pourable. So it's not easily pouring, but it is pourable should I want it to be pourable. So what I'm going to do is, I'm going to try it both ways. I'm going to take one of my Belgian buns, press it in, and then lift it out. And that makes an absolute mess, so we're not going to do it that way. Instead, we're going to put a spoonful on, and then just kind of move it around like so. It's kind of cream cheese frosting sort of thickness, and it does have a little bit of a creamy taste to it. So the last step is to just pop a singular cranberry in the middle of all of them. So now of course it is time to get one and have a taste. So we'll cut it straight down the middle intersection, see what we can see. Absolutely no swirls. Of course, but you can see the lemon curd and some of the cranberries inside. So the swirl maintained purely on the top that we can't see because it's been covered in icing sugar. Let's have a try of it. Very lemony. Quite a bit of sort of sour and bitterness to it like I expected with cranberries and lemon. And the dough is sort of crisp on the outsides and then soft in the middle. More like, I don't know if you've had fathead dough, but it kind of has a specific taste to it that's more like a pizza base, towards a pizza base. So you can use it for sweet things, but it's always going to be sort of bready on the inside rather than cakey or pillowy. They're not so much Belgian buns as they are lemon and cranberry cheese danishes, sweet cheese danishes. They've got a very Danishy taste to them. I think they're really nice, but of course they're not pillowy like a Belgian bun is because I chose not to use sort of yeast or gluten. It is tasty as sort of a breakfast Danish treat rather than, oh, this is a Belgian bun. It's not quite a Belgian bun. The lemon is definitely the most prevalent taste. Cranberries you can't massively taste, but I find with cranberries you can't taste them anyway. You get that pocket of sweet bitterness really more than anything. Be delicious with a cup of tea. And of course with the fathead dough, we can't taste cheese at all. I say a cheese Danish, I mean that creaminess from like cream cheese. It's got a lot of creaminess to it. Now, in terms of macronutrients, this serves 10 of these Belgian buns, sweet breakfast danishes, and each one is 212 calories, 8 grams of fat, 8 grams of protein, and 3.2 net carbs. So despite using lemon and quite a lot of cranberry, they're pretty alright carb wise. I wouldn't mind having that for breakfast. I'm really emphasising the fact that these would be great for a nice sweet breakfast. As always, thank you so much for joining me on this incredibly chaotic series. I hope that you enjoyed watching it as much as I enjoyed doing it. But for now, the Great British Bake Off is over. And with that being said, that's all for this video. Leave a like if you found it interesting, insightful or helpful. Subscribe for more keto content. Any questions, any comments, any queries, anything down below. Keep calm, keto on. Thanks for watching.